Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Kelly Saunders, Vice President of Policy and Engagement here at SBAM. I am filling in for Brian Callie today, who is on the road. And I have a new co-pilot today, not anyone that you're unfamiliar with, but I will let him introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Manning, and I'm the Grassroots Coordinator and Policy Advisor here at SBAM, filling in for Sarah Miller today. So, to start off, Kelly, we are going to be doing a deep dive today into the election, some of the consequences of the election, and what it means for us here in Lansing. But before we get started with that, we have a couple announcements to make to start our program.
Yes, well, as always on Monday, we recognize a new member, and so we want to welcome JNS Facility Maintenance out of Ann Arbor as a new member of our SBAM family. And their mission is to provide cleaner, healthier, and safer work environments. And so, who doesn't like that? If you are in the Washtenaw region and you need these kinds of services, make sure to look up JNS Facility Maintenance and welcome to the team and everyone there that works there.
Great, welcome. And Kelly, being that it is Veterans Day, we cannot forget to mention the veterans that have served our country in the past. We have a couple things going on here at SBAM that have to do with Veterans Day. Could you fill us in with that?
Yes, well, thank you to all of our veterans that are members of our SBAM family, but also all of you who have served and your families as well. We know what a sacrifice it is. There's a few things going on at SBAM as it pertains to veterans. A couple weeks ago, our Chief Revenue Officer, Michelle Beebe, came on and talked about how we are offering a new certification for veterans alongside the National Veterans Business Development Council. And so, if you are a veteran owned business and you are seeking certification, which essentially opens doors to procurement opportunities, not only at the state level through state agencies, but also at the national level through federal agencies. And then there are a lot of bigger companies nationwide that seek to do business with veterans. Obtaining this certification will help you do so. So we'll drop the link in the chat. Please make sure to visit our website to learn more. There is a discount to obtain that certification through us. We want to help you be more successful. And then the other item we want to mention is SBAM is a part of a conglomerate called Michigan Celebrates Small Business. And this is a 2-day event that will happen next year in April. And there'll be more details to come on that, but it culminates in a gala on the second day that is held at the Breslin Center in East Lansing. One of our categories for Michigan Celebrates Small Business, the awards, is the veteran owned small business category. There will be numerous awardees within that category. We'd encourage you to visit michigancelebrates.org, which is nominated. They can win awards. Those nominated today, but the category is open until 11:59 p.m. tonight. So please make sure to visit that website and to nominate a veteran owned business in your community. There's also numerous other categories offered at this awards gala. So make sure to check those out too. And if you have a small business in your community that you love visiting, let's take some time to recognize them.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Kelly, and of course, thank you to all the veterans who have served our country throughout the years. So, moving forward to the main content of our episode today, we are going to be talking about the election. As I'm sure everybody tuning in is aware, last Tuesday there was a pretty big election, a presidential election, and Michigan took center stage, was a part of a lot of the conversation leading up to the election. And so we are going to start by talking about the presidential election before working our way down the ballot and eventually down to the U.S. House, where Kelly and I spend much of our time. So to start out, as I mentioned previously, Michigan appeared to be a true toss-up going into election day. I think a lot of people were waiting to see which direction Michigan went. Some polls had it going one way or another. Regardless, it definitely appeared to be a true toss-up that could have went either way. But by the time Michigan was called on election day, or rather election eve, um, the presidential election was already tied up. Former President Trump had already secured the 270 electoral votes required to win the presidency. Just looking at Michigan, of course, President Trump won Michigan again. He had lost it in 2020, had won it in 2016, and won it again in 2024. And he had really made major gains all across the state. And that led to a lot of other victories for Republicans up and down the ballot. But one of those places where we did not see a Republican that was able to capitalize on that momentum behind President Trump was in the U.S. Senate race. So could you talk about that one, Kelly?
Sure. So I'll say wasn't able to, but almost. This one was a very tight race. We have had the opportunity for our members to engage with current U.S. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, who was up against former Congressman Mike Rogers, both from similar region, right smack dab in the middle of the state and kind of that capital region. And so we did see quite a bit of momentum follow President Trump up and down the ticket. But Alyssa Slotkin overperformed Vice President Harris here in Michigan and was able to secure the Senate seat here in Michigan. A reminder that U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow is vacating that seat. She's held it since 2001 and so has been a mainstay for many years. Their Senate seats, U.S. Senate seats in Michigan, don't come up very often. So this was a pretty pivotal race. And the fact that Alyssa Slotkin was able to outperform former Congressman Mike Rogers kind of bucked the trend in these different states that were truly sitting at the center stage. Mike Rogers was um, not funded as well as current U.S. Representative Alyssa Slotkin. She was out spending him about 4 to 1 in some places. And so the fact that he was able to narrow that gap and come very close to obtaining that seat says a lot about trends across the country, but it also says a lot about how Alyssa Slotkin presents herself and speaks to voters, which is truly up and down the middle and was able to appeal not only to maybe her Dem base, but pull some Republicans over and truly capture independence. And so Alyssa Slotkin will be the next U.S. Senator here from Michigan, take that post after the first of the year. And that does trickle down to some of the U.S. House seats that we're going to speak about now. So, Jacob, I'll let you walk through those. But let's start with that 7th District U.S. House seat currently held by Alyssa Slotkin and was hotly contested between former state senator Curtis Hertel and former state senator Tom Barrett.
Yeah, thank you. And for those that live in the area, they might be having some flashbacks to 2022 when this race between Alyssa Slotkin and the new incoming Congressman Tom Barrett was actually the highest spent congressional race of all time. It was a very hotly contested race that Congresswoman Slotkin was able to pull out. And this time it went to Congressman-elect Tom Barrett, who was going up against Curtis Hertel. Both Barrett and Hertel are former state senators who represented parts of this area in their time in the state Senate. Hertel comes from a very well-connected family. His father was in the Senate. His brother is in the state Senate now. So all the way throughout the family have been very involved politically. So definitely two quality candidates in this race, and it was a tightly contested one. But Barrett was able to pull it out in the end. And you know, Kelly had spoken about how successful Alyssa Slotkin in this race in her Senate race was, and just the results of this 7th congressional district race is another true testament to her strength as a candidate that she was able to pull out this race in 2022 that eventually this time in 2024 became a flip opportunity for Republicans to go from Democratic control to Republican control.
Yeah, and I think this will be a district to watch in the future on what are the trends truly happening here because it does seem to be flipping back and forth. And so people in the Lansing region tend to be more informed specifically on legislative issues at the state capitol because it's right there. So we'll see in the next election, not that we're trying to push everybody there already, But how will this trend in the future with voters and how they'll speak? So let's go to the 10th congressional district now, where John James was trying to retain his seat and had met a rematch, if you will, in former Judge Marlinga. What happened there?
Yeah, this was another one of those races that a lot of people were watching heading into Tuesday because there was a lot of talk before the election about the party realignment and the way that different voters have started to break for one party or the other. And a lot of people were looking at the 10th congressional district, which is largely based in southern Macomb County with a little bit of Rochester in Oakland County as well. And a lot of people were looking at this to see if that college educated voter was going to break for Kamala Harris and the Democrats like was expected. And as a result, maybe this race would go differently than it did in 2022 when former Judge Marlinga was unable to defeat uh, Congressman John James. And so they went at it again this time, and Congressman John James retained his seat in the House. Marlinga fell short, and so he will hold that seat for another 2 years. And another reason why this seat had some interest is there are a lot of eyes on John James right now. I don't think it's any secret. I don't know if he said it openly, but certainly a lot of speculation that John James has his eyes set on the gubernatorial election in 2026. A loss in this congressional race, losing his seat after just one term in Congress, would have been a pretty major setback for his hopes there. But for now, it looks like they are kept alive as he returns to Washington, D.C. for another term in Congress.
Yes, so we'll be watching there too to what Congressman John James might do next. Another race that really has some trickle down effects, if you will, is the 8th congressional race. This seat was being vacated by Congressman Dan Kildee, who has decided to not run, who had not decided to run for reelection, had a cancer diagnosis earlier in the year, and just really wanted to focus on his family. The Kildees have held that seat for a very, very long time in the Saginaw Bay region. And we had a hotly contested one between current state senator Kristen McDonald-Rivet and an attorney Paul Young. So give us some information on what happened there and what might be happening in the state senate next.
Yeah, and this was another one that people were watching. As the election got closer, there was some speculation that Young could make this a competitive race, and if it was a good night for Republicans, that he may actually be able to take the seat. In the end, that didn't end up happening, despite it being a good night for Republicans. And the new Congresswoman in this area will be Kristen McDonald-Rivet. And as Kelly had mentioned, Senator McDonald-Rivet is currently a member of the Michigan State Senate. She represents that district with Saginaw Bay City and Midland up north there. Um, and she is actually just serving her first term in office now. And upon her taking this seat and going to DC, she will be vacating her seat in the Michigan State House. So, backing up a little bit, the Michigan State House is currently divided. The Democrats have a 20 to 18 majority. So, a very slim majority, about as slim as you could get, but it's about to get even slimmer when it will become a 19-18 majority. Um, this will be a vacancy that will need to be filled via a special election. When Senator McDonald-Rivet won this race in 2022, it was a pretty close race. She won by about 6.5 percentage points in a year that was very favorable to Democrats in 2022. I would expect to see a pretty competitive race from both sides in this special election. There are some pretty big names that are already being thrown out there, and this will be seen by Republicans as an opportunity to bring a tie in the Senate, which would be a pretty big deal for them, especially after taking the Michigan House, as we will talk about in a little bit here. So, moving on from these congressional races, Kelly, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of these other races. We had talked about how Republicans had enjoyed a lot of success on Tuesday night, but there were two races in Michigan that were called relatively early in the night where the Republican-backed candidates did not have a good night. Could you talk about the Michigan Supreme Court?
Yes, so you all are aware that we have had a lot of dealings with the Michigan Supreme Court in the past few years, filing amicus briefs on numerous cases, most recent, obviously, being the adopt and amend decision. And so Democrats were able to secure both Michigan Supreme Court seats that were up for grabs. Current Justice Kyra Bolden was trying to retain her seat. She had been appointed by the governor and had to now rerun to keep her seat. And then there was another candidate, Kimberly Ann Thomas, that was running to fill current retiring Justice David Viviano. And she was facing current state representative Andrew Fink. Justice Kyra Bolden was facing current branch circuit court Judge O'Grady. And so both Kimberly Ann Thomas and Justice Bolden secured their victories early in the night. That is a part of the nonpartisan ballot portion of the ballot. However, those candidates are nominated by political parties, which some of you are probably saying that makes zero sense. We're not arguing that point. But the message from Justice Bolden and now soon to be Michigan Supreme Court Justice Kimberly Ann Thomas, their messaging was focused on protecting women's reproductive rights on the Michigan Supreme Court. And that message has proven to be very effective in the past, and it was on election night this time as well. So this expands the Democrat control on our highest court, 5-2, and we will see how things unfold there. Unfortunately, we had our small biz pack can endorse their opponents, but we look forward to working with Justice Bolden and the soon to be new Justice Thomas as they take the bench. So, Jacob, we are now going to dive into maybe some statistics on the Small Biz PAC. That's obviously an operation within SBAM that makes recommendations on who our members should vote for through the endorsement process. And so, can you please share with our viewership how our Small Biz PAC did, what our win ratios were, how that evening turned out for us?
Yeah. And just to back up a little bit, our general process that we do from the staff end, Kelly and I will go and we will look for questionnaires for all candidates in Michigan's statewide races. So we had all of Michigan's 110 House districts were up for grabs this year. And so we were seeking questionnaires for all of those elections or all of those races. We did very well. We received 94 questionnaires out of Michigan's 110, or excuse me, we received questionnaires in 94 races. We received more than 94 questionnaires, but we received questionnaires in 94 races. And we received questionnaires in all of the competitive races too, which was a really big one. So we received all these questionnaires, and together with voting records and other evidence, we present this information to the Small Biz PAC board, and they make recommendations on who we should endorse. And it looks like this time they did a pretty good job on choosing which races to be involved in and which ones not to be involved in. We ended up being involved in 70 different Michigan House races for this cycle. And of those 70, 68 of those candidates won their election, which is a winning percentage of about 97%, a little over 97%. So I would say that's pretty good. And we didn't play it safe either. We took chances. We went after four different incumbents. We defended a lot of incumbents that were in tightly contested races. And all of the incumbents we endorsed held on. And we actually had some success further with some candidates that were able to take out the incumbents that they were going up against.
Yeah, we're always proud of the work that the Small Biz PAC board does. They make a lot of tough decisions, and we hope that you found our website very helpful during this process as you were trying to decide who to represent you here in Lansing. So, Republicans are now going to be in control of the Michigan House, and that was obviously a pretty big deal. We've talked about the last 2 years how the Democrats have had the trifecta and that they have controlled the state house with a 56-54 split, 56 Democrats, 54 Republicans. And so on election night, Republicans actually secured 58 House seats, with Democrats securing 52. Republicans were able to maintain all of their seats that they currently had in the form of incumbents, to your point, and to flip four more. And so, what we thought that we would do is go over those four seats that were flipped, just to share some insights, and then we'll dive in a little bit to what this lame duck session might look like legislatively for the remainder of this term. And so, Jacob, let's start with the Representative Nate Shannon seat in the Sterling Heights region. What happened there?
Yeah, this going into the election, this was a race that a lot of people had their eyes on. A lot of people thought that Nate Shannon could potentially be in trouble, State Representative Nate Shannon. He was seeking his fourth term in office, and so he is no stranger to running tight elections. He won with this same district map in 2022. But what a lot of people were looking at going into this race is that no incumbent Democrat was running in a Trumpier district, or a district that Trump had fared better in 2022. And so just looking at what the landscape was like in 2022, definitely a better year for Democrats, definitely a better top of the ticket. And then going into 2024, obviously with President Trump at the top of the ticket, bringing a lot of that Republican turnout, it ended up being a better year for Republicans. And that bore out in Representative Shannon's district. This is a district in Macomb County, like Sterling Heights area, Utica, and definitely an area that's been trending more red over time. And in the last couple of elections, Republicans haven't run the strongest candidates in this area. But in 2024, they came with this guy that we've heard a lot of good things about. The Small Biz PAC did not endorse in this race, but Ron Robinson is the representative-elect in this area. He's a former radio personality. He's a city councilman for Utica, and it sounds like he really got out on the doors and was able to make this a flip seat for the House Republicans.
Let's move downriver. Representative Jamie Churches was probably the number one seat to watch in this race. Downriver has tended to trend more Republican, specifically to your point, in Trump years. And she was being taken on by someone who was young with a lot of energy. So let's go over that race in the downriver region.
Yeah, so this was another one of these districts that Trump had won in 2022, but Democrats had won in 20 excuse me, that Trump had won in 2020, but Democrats had won in 2022. So in 2022, with the favorable top of the ticket, Representative Jamie Churches was able to secure her first victory, her first term in office, just by a very narrow margin. And so looking at what the landscape was going to look like for 2024, this seemed like an obvious flip opportunity for Republicans. There was a little bit of, I don't want to say drama, but a little bit of apprehension with this one. People maybe a little bit skeptical of the candidate that Republicans had chosen, or the Republican candidate that had won the primary in this race. Representative-elect Riley Linting is actually a college student, 22 years old. Um, and she ended up managing to win this district, thanks in large part to uh, the just the motion of the district definitely trending more red, but it also does sound like she got out on the doors and was working hard to flip this one. Um, and so that is another one. Two seats between Shannon and Linting that were both you'd call them Trump seats that ended up going the way for Republicans.
Well, let's go from one corner of the state to the UP, which is not been Trump country when it comes to Marquette. A current seated Representative Jen Hill was also in the top five to watch, had a very formidable opponent up there for the first time in many years. So, what happened in the Marquette district?
Yeah, this one for people around Lansing, this seat, the Marquette-based House of Representatives seat, was always seen as the white whale for Republicans. It was always the seat that they would try to go after, they'd try to sink money into, and they'd say, "We're going to flip this seat," but it would always be blue. And just in 2022, Sarah Kembenzi, former representative of that area, was term limited, and so she was unable to run again. And she was replaced by Jen Hill, who was significantly further left, I think it's fair to say, than where Representative Kembenzi ran. And we've seen over time this area has gotten redder over time. Jen Hill won in 2022 by a smaller margin than Representative Ken Bensi had in her previous elections. And the Republicans found a really solid recruit for this area as well. Something that was against Republicans in this area for the long time, for a while, is that they've been running the same candidate over and over again. I think they had a candidate that ran 4 or 5 times in a row and was unable to succeed any of those times. This time they found former weatherman Carl Bonac, who, given his occupation or his prior occupation, had a very high name recognition in the area, has been in a lot of people's on a lot of people's TV screens in their living rooms over the years, and so is a well-known face and a well-known figure. And the Republicans, it sounds like they've been trying to get him for a while. And this time he decided to run and take on first-term incumbent Jen Hill. And with a combination of that name ID and then attacking that further left voting record that Representative Hill has, they were able to make this a flip for the first time in decades.
And the final seat we'll go over is actually in the Battle Creek region. Representative Jim Hadsma has been in that seat. And this is also a district that has trended a little bit more red when Trump has been on the ticket. And so what happened there?
Yeah, this is the Battle Creek seat, Calhoun County. We've definitely seen trend red, but Representative Jim Hadsma has had a hold on this district for the past. I believe this he was running for his fourth term as well. Um, and this was actually the closest election in the entire state house after a little bit of drama late last week. It turns out that there was an error in counting some of the votes. Some of the votes in the actual Battle Creek precincts were not counted correctly. And by the time the everything was said and done, all the votes were counted. The margin in this race was 58 votes that Representative-elect Steve Frisbee ended up defeating Jim Hadsma. And you may recognize Representative Hadsma's name. He is the chair of the Labor Committee. So we have talked about him quite a bit with a lot of the labor and employment issues that have been going on throughout the state. But Representative Hadsma is on his way out, and that is uh, soon going to be represented by Steve Frisbee.
Definitely the closest one. Definitely. So there's a couple things as we wrap up our show here. Last week, late in the week, there were already leadership elections heading into 2025. Pretty customary after the election to get everybody in and choose your leadership. With the Republicans taking the House back, if you will, they decided to choose current Minority Leader Matt Hall to be the next Speaker of the House beginning in 2025. He is also of Southwest Michigan, the Marshall area, and will be taking that post first of the year. Many of you are probably asking Speaker Joe Tate what will be happening within the Democrat Party come the first of the year. Speaker Tate decided to not run for leadership in 2025, which left the door open for that caucus to choose new leadership, as Joe Tate will be returning to the House. But Representative Ranji Puri has been chosen to lead the Democrat caucus, and he is out of Canton, Michigan. And so we will look forward to working with both the incoming Speaker elect and Minority Leader elect as we head into 2025. One last thing that we need to cover before we end the day is we have a call to action. Last week, the House of Representatives did intro a bill, a vehicle bill, to change the Earned Sick Time Act. And so, Jacob, as we finish up the show, can you tell people how to get involved and explain a little bit more what a shell bill is.
Yeah, so as I'm sure a lot of everybody who's listening is aware, this issue, the Earned Sick Time Act, is at the absolute top of our list of things that we want to see done before the end of this legislative lame duck term. So, luckily, this last week, Thursday, there were two bills introduced to address the problems with Adopt and Amend and help soften the blow for employers. Uh, House Bill 6056 was introduced to address the tip credit for restaurants and servers, and House Bill 6057 was introduced to help with some implementation changes on the Earned Sick Time Act. And these are some of the things that we have been advocating for a while with the Earned Sick Time Act. And so what we are asking now that we have bill numbers, we are asking you to reach out to your legislators and let them know these bills are introduced, but they are shell bills. They are not in their final form. There's still amendments that need to be made to them to make it so they can be effective for small businesses and so that small businesses can better deal with these new mandates that are coming as a result of the Adopt and Amend Supreme Court decision. So it is a huge help for people to reach out and to do the call to actions and to make your voice be heard. This call to action will be going out to your state representative, your state senator, and the governor, just telling them time is running out on this lame duck legislative term. February 21st is getting closer and closer, and we need to resolve the uncertainty as soon as possible so people can understand what the landscape is heading into next year.
Yes, we need you, and you'll be hearing from Jacob, myself, and Brian as we go through the rest of this term. And we couldn't be more thankful for you for joining us today. We hope that this legislative landscape and overview was helpful to you. We will look forward to being with you again. And until then, have a great rest of the week.